Good morning, this is Brigid, and those of you who are subscribers to both of my channels know that I usually have a live stream that I do Mondays on the Katonia podcast page. What I'm going to try to do over here on Transition Life Coaching, ideally I'd like to do this on a daily basis, but I am going to start trying to do a kind of morning coffee thing, because when I first get up in the morning, and usually I get up a lot earlier than this, I spend a lot of time thinking, so I have a lot of, so this is the time of day when my mind really is working, and probably working at its best. Morning is when I do a lot of my regular, any kind of work that requires writing things, doing proposals, doing stuff like that, doing anything administrative, because in the morning is when my brain is the freshest. So this is a new idea that I have. Now, those of you who follow this page may have seen yesterday that I have a new website that's up. Now, I had a website called liminalreiki.com, and Liminal Reiki ended up, it ended up not being the name of my business, namely because it started out as the name, but then liminal is a term that a lot of people don't know. Reiki is a term that it applies to one specific modality that I have experience in and that I do, but it's not really the totality of what I do. And I think it really, as far as a business thing, it kind of misled people. So I thought, okay, I had a friend who said to me, she goes, well, what you really do is transition life coaching. So that's what I do now. And that's what I call the business. So I'm happy to have a domain that actually reflects that, transitionlifecoaching.net. And I've switched up a little bit of what I do, because as this coaching and mentoring service really has evolved over the last few years, I've been focusing a little bit more on the spiritual coaching aspect and getting into things. Obviously I still do teaching. I'm getting ready to open up a school on the Katonia side of things. I had one, but the model wasn't really working out. So I have a new thing that I'm coming up with, where I'm going to be partnering with other PhDs to put together an actual school focused mainly on feminine myth, because that's what Katonia is focused on. But on this side of things, I think this channel has been primarily known for tarot and tarot readings. And while I'll probably try to do more of those, and of course I have the Liminal Tarot channel, which is connected to this, and this video will actually end up being posted there probably tomorrow or later today. I'm going to try to use that not only just for the daily, bi-weekly tarot videos. I do 6 signs a week. I want it to be more about coaching and my coaching practice and the kind of things that I'm going through here, because one of the big questions I've gotten since I opened up this site was, well, what's happened to your tarot links? I got text messages and emails from regular clients who have said, well, you had a link for 30-minute tarot, you had a link for 1 hour tarot. And so where did they go? And so now I've told my regular clients, DM me or text me or whatever if you have my information, and we will set something up, through Venmo, PayPal, or some other thing. And I'll do it that way, because I'm really trying to keep this to doing coaching primarily. Doing coaching, the one reading that I do is the huge life assessment reading. And really that's meant to be kind of a preliminary to the coaching that I do, but not everybody wants to. It depends on the person. Some people, the front money and everything is fine for them. But the reason that particular service costs so much is because I'm running 2 astrological charts. I'm doing a human design chart. I'm interpreting all of those. It's more of an overview of all 3 of them. But then I'm kind of putting together a profile of you, of where you've come from, what your energy level is, what things you may be dealing with, what wounds you may have, what ancestral issues you may have, what your life challenges might be. Because oftentimes when people come to me for coaching, they're coming because they're in some kind of a crisis. There's something, or there's just some major change going on. One of the things that I have found about change is that, and I've said this on a video that I just put on the new site to introduce the new site, and to talk about my work with Azrael, which I'm not going to talk about here because that video does discuss it. But I find that the harder thing, oftentimes when we've had a loss, that whatever that loss is, or when we've had a big change, even if it's something we've really been anticipating. If you don't even take a negative loss like a death, let's take something like, okay, you've decided to leave your job, or decided you want to leave your job. You don't like it anymore, right? You decide like, okay, this is stressing me out. I don't want to do this anymore. So you finally take the risk and leave your job. And you have kind of a plan about what you might want to do. You might have some savings or something to help you move forward a little bit. But then you're like, well, okay, but I don't know what to do. Like, what's next? I'm used to going into an office. I'm used to working 9 to 5. I'm used to driving in every day. And even though that may have been the aspect of your life that you hated, that's the aspect of your life that you know. And trying to do something different, you'll find that if you're in that situation, and I know quite a few people who are, you wake up in the morning and like you're almost panicking, like I'm doing something wrong because I'm not getting in my car and driving to work. Or you sit there and you feel that you're somehow, because you're not up working 8 hours a day at something, that you're a bad person. And trying to decompress and deprogram from that, that's the hard part. The hard part isn't saying, okay, that's it, I quit. Because generally we may be tired of a particular situation and be like, okay, it's relief to get out of there. But then it becomes, because obviously you're dealing with some very real things. You know, what are my goals for the future? How am I going to pay the mortgage? How am I going to, or the rent or whatever? What are my next steps going to be? How am I going to finance those if that's been a thing? So, it's, I don't know. It's something where the answer is going to be different for each person, but there's a psychological process that goes on. A lot of people get tempted to say like, okay, I'm just going to jump back and find another job. But then they kind of end up repeating the same thing over and over again. That's been an issue for them. And then they say, why did I do this to myself? So we get caught in a loop because we don't know how to think differently. And one of the things that you'll hear, like when I do readings, a lot of times I'll get cards that'll say, well, think outside the box. And my response to that is, well, that's great, but if I'm supposed to be thinking in a totally different way, like throw me a bone here, like show me how am I supposed to think about this thing differently? Like I don't, how do I do that? And there's not one uniform answer to that question, but usually it requires that we look at the situation from a different direction. One of the reasons I use tarot so heavily is because it's a symbol system that connects a lot to our consciousness in the same way that dream symbolism connects. Dream work is something I do very heavily with this particular brand of coaching because dream work is something that is that is to me that is your unconscious, that is the collective unconscious, that is your own unconscious, that is your own body, that is your own soul, your own being talking to you. A lot of times we dismiss dreams now, and sometimes dreams can arise due to chemical things. I was talking to somebody recently who I don't want to give a context really because I haven't gotten permission to say anything who this person is, but basically there was a conversation about dreams, and they had said that they were having really, really terrible dreams, really terrible nightmares, but they started when they were taking magnesium. And so they realized that seemed to be the common denominator. Whenever they took this one particular sleep aid or whatever with magnesium, they had horrific and horrendous nightmares. So they stopped doing it. There's other cases, for example, caffeine. If you decide you're going to suddenly go cold turkey and quit caffeine, I know I've tried to do that in the past, and as you can see, I failed at that. But I found that at least the one following night, maybe two, I would also have horrific nightmares and horrific headaches. But that's part of like a withdrawal process. So there is a chemical component to dreams for sure. But to say that therefore they're all chemically generated, it still begs the question as to why the kind of material that you see comes up. I've always had that question about dementia patients, or those who might be experiencing certain kind of disorders that are maybe on the schizoid scale, where they see a reality that you don't. I've often told the story about the time I was a librarian, and I was in charge of this one library, we had a regular library patron who was somebody who was supposed to be on medication. Sometimes that person wasn't. And they had, they would come in and they would be talking to somebody who nobody else could see. I mean, to their invisible friend. And so people would go, oh boy, here comes so-and-so with their invisible friend again. You know, people would say that. You know, this is, by the way, this is very common for public libraries. This is not, it's not an unusual thing at all. There's a mythology around public libraries that says, like whenever we would be, when I used to work in a public library and we would do contract negotiations and stuff, they would say, oh, but the library, you know, it's such a relaxing place to work. And we're like, yeah, come work here. It's because it's a public place, because anybody can come in. And it's not that we want to keep people out, but you're not, you have people who are trained in librarianship and who are not necessarily trained in psychology, or in therapy, or in dealing with certain types of patients. It's just not, that's just not part of the deal. So you frequently may be confronted with situations where you say, wow, what do I do here? You know, how do I handle this? And so with this particular individual, there was a night that we were closing and I was the closing librarian who was closing. I was working reference, and I had some of the front desk staff come over to me and say, I hate to tell you this, but this person, I'm not going to say their name, is in the back, and now they're punching and fighting with their invisible friend. And of course it was back in an area where there were rare books and there were glass cases, and I'm going, oh good God, because it was like half an hour before closing. So I was like, okay, well, I'm in charge. I have to deal with this. It's my job. So I get up and I walk to the back and I see this altercation going on that looks, kind of like a pantomime, because we don't see the other person, right? So I just said, look, both of you knock it off. And everybody laughs when I say that, because it sounds like I'm picking, but I'm not. I'm not making fun of the person. I'm actually saying, I'm assuming that in that person's reality that there's somebody else there. And of course the person turned to me and said, well, he started it. And I said, well, look, I'm not getting involved in your personal fight. Doesn't matter who started it. It's a library. We don't have fighting in the library. And we're getting ready to close soon. So if you guys are going to continue this, you're going to have to take it outside. And so he walked out, and he was kind of mumbling to his friend going, oh, it's all your fault. And then when I had to tell my boss the next day, she looked at me, she says, you didn't say that. I said, yes, I did. And I bring it up. But the reason I bring it up is I'm not picking on this guy. This guy, obviously, in his reality, there's somebody else there. Somebody else real enough to him that he feels the need to engage with somebody that nobody else sees. And so my question has always been, what is going on there? People will say, oh, well, it's the chemicals in your brain making this or that happen. And I'm like, okay, yeah, there's a chemical component to it, very clearly. But to say that it's making it happen. And the example I often give here is when you have a feeling of falling in love with somebody. If you see somebody and you fall in love. Sorry, I want my coffee before it gets cold. If you fall in love with somebody and that person is okay, so what happens? Obviously, there's a chemical reaction that occurs when you fall in love, and that's been studied. And there's a certain enzyme that is produced, and I always get it mixed up with the drug oxytocin or oxytocin. So I'm probably going to say it wrong, but I know it's an oxy enzyme that is produced that makes you, that floods you with that feeling of happiness, that feeling of joy. And so they'll say, oh, well, yes, when you fall in love, that this is the chemical reaction that occurs. So my question has always been, okay, well, which way is it? Is it that you fall in love and then you have the reaction, or do you have the reaction and then fall in love? Then it wouldn't be a reaction, right? That you have a production of this chemical and then you fall in love. And we do know that it does not happen that way. Like it's funny. That's almost like the Cupid's arrow idea, right? That you get shot with the arrow and you look at somebody and boom, you fall in love. But that's not typically how it happens. That's when you can feel happy. I can feel happy and be around lots of people. That doesn't mean I'm in love with them. And if a man comes in front of me and I happen to, be in a state where my body is full of that particular enzyme, or hormone or reaction, then I'm not going to look at that person and go, automatically be like, oh my God, now I'm in love with them. Like, that's not how it works. Okay. My point being is that I don't know that it can be proven that these chemicals cause certain states. Certainly the imbalance of these chemicals, they seem to release something that goes on in the brain, and it's not, or in the brain or in our consciousness. I've always operated under the theory that our brain really is a filter for our consciousness, not the source of it. I feel like the source of it, there obviously is a consciousness to the body and electricity to the body. But what neuroscientists have talked about is the fact that now it seems like our consciousness is connected to a network of consciousness. Consciousness is that's a word, and that it's really not. It's not something that you can locate. Because whenever you will see a study that says, "Oh, we think we've located consciousness in this particular part of the brain," then another study will come up and they'll be like, "Nope, it's not there." Well, how about over here? Nope, it's not there because it's not located in your brain. That's just by assertion. It's not located in the brain. I feel like the brain acts as a filter against your consciousness, actually. Your nervous system is there to regulate the things that come in and out of your life. But the problem is that we overregulate because we rely so heavily on what goes on in our minds and in our thoughts that we don't, when we have like a little nudging from our inner voice that seems to come out of nowhere, or we have a strong feeling about something, or we see something and it brings up a particular thing, we tend to ignore those things. We tend to be, if we have a feeling about something and then for example, okay, a good example is I've had somebody talking to me recently about when they would meet somebody, and if they didn't have a good feeling about the person, they would feel very, very guilty. They'd be like, I don't know this person. Here I am being prejudicial. I'm prejudging them. And I'm like, what are you? Are you prejudging them? Because then I say to them, okay, so what happened as you got to know that person? Did that person turn out to be a good person? And they were like, no, actually, they were exactly what I thought initially. And I'm like, well, there you go. It's something inside of you. And I don't believe this is just, I'm not an evolutionary psych person. I don't just think it's your biological instinct, survival instinct or something. We all do have an intuition. We do all have other senses. There's a wonderful book that I wish was still in print called The Black Goddess and the Sixth Sense, which is a fantastic exploration not only of things that we think of as intuitive senses or like ESP or something like that, but also of the way in which the regular five senses that we have, in the way in which those are suppressed, in which we don't use those to their fullest capacity. And what we use primarily is our brain. And so, yeah, because we use our brain so often, we don't really know how to connect to the world in any other way. We sit there and we will. So if we're in an experience, let's just say you are in a place, and I don't know, maybe you're on vacation and you encounter this breathtaking sight that just absolutely, when you look at it, it just, I don't know, you just have that feeling of being in the moment. And as soon as you have that feeling, you immediately start to analyze that feeling. And then you've lost the moment because you're spending so much time in analysis. But it's not like you have to feel bad about that. You can't really help that. That's just what you do. That's how our brains work. And that's the way we've been conditioned. And it's not, I don't mean just individually, but collectively, that's how the culture works. That's how consciousness has developed in humans. And we have a thing about privileging that. So certainly for myself, as somebody, as I've said before, who works as an academic, obviously I'm a professor. In fact, I've got papers to grade today after I'm done with this. I've got all these post-grad work. I've been obviously engaged in a lot of intellectual pursuits, thinking about things, talking about evidence-based things and things like that. Obviously, I understand the value of all of that. So when I work as a spiritual coach, it's not that people tend to think of it as an either or proposition. Like, well, either you're a rational person or you're into all that weird spiritual stuff, And I'm like, no, actually, a balanced person is somebody who obviously pays attention to what they see, to what we think of as common sense and logic, but also somebody who's also well aware that sometimes there's a lot of things that happen that don't necessarily fall into the causal patterns, what we expect to happen. And the question is, well, how do you deal with that? Are you open to that? Do you immediately shut it out and go, well, no, that's stupid because it doesn't follow this causal pattern? There's a lot there about opening yourself up to what else might be there, because you have to recognize that not only do we have a brain that filters, but the fact that all of our focus is through these eyes, okay, and through our ears, like just literally what's in front of us, we lose the sense of just about everything else around us. And I think as we get older, we start life, we graduate high school, if we're in the US, that is, and if you go to college and you do all these things, and then you go get a job, and maybe you start a family, maybe you get married, maybe you don't. Whatever your life path is, they always talk about it as being the midlife crisis, right? You reach this point where you all of a sudden realize that, like all of a sudden, everything in your life suddenly doesn't have the same meaning anymore. Now, this has often been characterized as like it usually gets portrayed in the example of like the husband who decides all of a sudden to run off with his younger mistress or something and get a sports car. Like that's usually the way it's characterized, almost like it's a childish thing, like I'm running away from my responsibilities. Okay. But the thing is, you're not running away from your responsibilities. In some cases, maybe some people are, but it's really there. You reach a point in your life where all of a sudden you say, wait a minute, this is not who I am. And this is not where I want to be. And so at that point, a lot of people, what ends up happening at that point, there's a couple, there probably could be a variety of different reactions to it, but probably one of the main ones is, two, is what that either people will say, I've been in this job too long and I'm too invested, so even though I hate being here now, I've just got to hang in for 10 more years or, whatever the time frame is. And they've just sort of, doggedly resigned themselves to, I'm going to retire, so I have that pension, so I have that plan. People don't get health benefits anymore with the retirement, very rarely. So that's not even a thing anymore. It used to be like, then I can retire with my benefits. But a lot of employers don't provide pensions. You basically have to wait until you're eligible for Social Security, or if you do have, like I work for the state, and I do have it in the pension system, but you have to wait till you're at least probably like 59 to be able to draw on any of that. So if you say this happens to you in your late 30s or your early 40s, you might sit there and go, okay, but I've got X number of years until I can officially retire. But this is not what I want to do anymore. So oftentimes this is when people think about doing something different. And I can tell you that COVID is something that really brought this up for a lot of people, because they realized when they were at home, and of course the people who hopefully weren't sick. Because a lot of people did get sick, which was the horrible and tragic part. But certainly just culturally it made an impact, because people couldn't go anywhere and do the same things for like a year. And you start to recognize after a while, I guess if you were in the same space with people for all that time, how you felt about those people, right? And how you managed to negotiate being around each other all the time. And then there's also, like, I live alone, so for me, yes, I had my work to do. I still worked from home from my job. I don't like driving, so I was like, hey, this is great. I don't have to drive. And during that period of time, I managed to write 2 books and design an Oracle deck while I was on COVID, until that we had asked to go back to work. And then I decided I didn't want to go back. That it wasn't, I had a lot of things that contributed to that decision, but so I said, no, I'm going to make a living doing something else. So I have personal experience with this. But I also deal with a lot of people who are in the same boat. And it's a process, because you're not only making a change to what you do, you may be trying to do something totally different in a totally different way. And you have to remember that you don't know how to do that right off, So there's a learning curve there. And there needs to be a little bit of preparation for that. Some people can negotiate that change better than others. Most of us have a hard time if we're used to having a certain steady paycheck coming from somewhere. For me, I never really lost a steady paycheck because I always had a part-time gig, but in terms of what I was used to having every month, I had savings to a degree, and then it was like, okay, well, after that's gone, then what? You have a certain amount of time to build things up, but you never know what that time frame is going to be. So in any case, a lot of the work that I do, it's about guiding people through those transitions. I don't tell people how to do it because you can't tell anybody how to do it. It's a question of what are the issues that are coming up and what's happening for you. So one of the things I wanted to do this morning is I wanted to do a quick, I usually like to do a reading, but I'm going to do a quick Osho Zen reading for those watching. And thank you for those of you who have joined me. And also for anybody who's watching this afterwards, just to see what the tone is for the day. And this is general, this is not for me personally. Now I'm going to do a quick spread here. And I wish my camera was adjustable enough that I could flip it down, but I'll hold the cards up and show you what I have. Okay. Wow, this is an interesting one. Okay, so the first card that we have is Intensity, which is the Knight of Wands. So intensity has to do with having a lot of energy. Now, astrologically right now, Mars has moved into Aries. So certainly I'm somebody who has very strong Mars influence in my chart. Astrology is another component that I use with what I'm doing. And so I noticed a shift immediately, like now all of a sudden I can do all this stuff, whereas I was feeling kind of lethargic before. So there's a tremendous amount of intensity right now, I think, for a lot of people because, this Mars in Aries energy is now like, okay, now we're ready to do stuff. And here's the internal feeling, nothingness or no-thingness, as it's called. And this is equivalent to the Hierophant card, but it's literally exactly what I just said. Internally, we're in the gap. It's this idea of people feeling like they're in the gap and not knowing, it's a scary place. But what this card points out is that being in the gap can also mean, there's the fear of, oh, will I not make it? But it's also pregnant with possibility. It's also, oh, I could really spectacularly make it too. It doesn't have to be the negative. It can be the positive, but we always tend to, because it doesn't fit in with our previous script, think, oh, it's going to be the negative, right? The external feeling of which we are aware, well, we have the Lovers here. So the Lovers can mean a couple of things. For some people, it might be about working with others or partnering with others. It could be just about finding love and understanding love. Self-love is often part of this too, because a lot of times we are really ruthlessly critical with ourselves during a period of transition, and about all the things, oh, you did this and you shouldn't have done that, and you made this mistake and you did that. And this is more about not only learning to love ourselves, but then being able to share that with other people, whatever that means. And it doesn't have to be romantic love. I mean, this isn't, in this particular deck, it's not necessarily a card of romantic love. It's more of about love on a grander scale, that kind of love that allows us to really connect with each other in an authentic way and to be able to share in an authentic way. But of course, what we have here is we have the Miser card, which is the Four of Pentacles in this deck. And what the Miser is saying, that a lot of times, and this is a very common reaction, we hang on to what we have and we build a wall around ourselves because we fear lack. We hoard the things that we have because we're afraid of what that empty space is. We're afraid of, if I move forward, if I trust this person, is this person trustworthy? Is this situation trustworthy? What should I do? All right? And the outcome is the Aloneness card. So when aloneness comes up, this means that we need to, this is like having a time for retreat. So I think there's a lot of people here in the middle of this intensity, because this is not a personal reading, this is a general reading. There's this sense here that you may need to take some time out to learn how to be by yourself. Like that's another hard skill that people have. Learning how to be by yourself. We're not good at that. I talk to a lot of people. I do have a lot of experience doing that because I've lived by myself for over 20 years now, and I mean, while I have a lot of friends and I do have a lot of people around me and, people I've, dated and people I've been involved with and so forth, it's just, I'm generally speaking, I'm kind of flying solo. But this, I think, is more about taking time to like be alone and to listen to yourself. That's one thing we don't like to do. We like chatter. I remember one of my cohorts in university had given an assignment to her students that said, I want you to sit for 30 minutes and do nothing. Like no phone, no internet, no TV, no nothing. Sit for 30 minutes, just sitting doing nothing, and then write about it. And she said all of those students were kind of like, this was the most horrible experience of my life because people don't know how to sit with themselves. It's a, we get restless. We have that intensity. We're restless. And that restlessness is what holds us into place and what makes us think, oh, but if I give this away or let go of that, I'm not going to have anything now. Okay? So there's this need to be able to connect with our inner voice. It's exactly what I was saying actually through most of this talk. Now I'm trying to keep these to a half an hour, so I'm probably going to end this, but I do want to pull one more card. And I'm going to use the Essential Oil Oracle because I like this one. It's kind of a nice general thing. And that way people can have a little mini reading from me for the day. And I don't know, hopefully what I'm talking about will give you something to think about. If people have questions for me that you want me to discuss on this morning coffee, because I'm going to try to do it daily. If I wake up with a massive migraine, then maybe I won't. I'll probably have to post something and say, sorry, tomorrow. But I will, I'm happy to take people's questions too if you DM them to me on transition.life.coaching at Instagram. I'm happy to discuss that on my next program, if that's appropriate for you. So, and of course, like I said, my website, I'm always available for coaching, for new coaching clients. Okay, this is interesting. Our card for the day is respiratory, and the key word is breath. The trigger statement is, I can't breathe. The true statement is, I open up to all possibility. Literally what I just said. What's the possibility rather than feeling like, I'm stuck. You are ready to let go of suffering so that you can take in new possibilities. Release so you can receive. Okay? I did a reading for somebody last week and they said to me, it's really amazing how when you do these different card sets, how they all somehow come together with the same message. And I said, well, yeah, because there's something to that connection, just as there's something to your dream imagery. It's trying to tell us something, and our mind. I mean, we work in language, and that's the main type of symbol that we work in. But we also work in image, and that one works a lot in words. But also these images and so forth and concepts are also part of what our understanding is. And I think part of what we need to do is get out of our heads and tap more into that understanding that we have that goes beyond just what I think, and allow some of these other feelings and gut instincts and so forth to flow through and inform us, because for many of us that's where our authority really is, not in the jumble of things that we go round and round in and drain ourselves in our brains. So that's it for me for today. Thank you so much for joining me. Like I said, I'm going to try to do these around between 6:30 and 7 in the mornings. So if you want to continue to join me, I will be here. Have a really great day, and namaste, and I'll see you next time.